Right. So by the end of today, I hope to sort everyone out into teams. So I just want to check with the five of you, which is an absurdly low number of people, but that's okay, I like small groups. Were you all either there for the previous sessions, or have you slash seen the recordings of the previous sessions? Because I'll be picking up from last time. Is there anyone who hasn't? Okay.
I wasn't there of the last session, but I got some screenshots from my friend Ashwin. He sent me screenshots from the meeting.
Okay. If you're friends with him, can you also just ask him where he is?
He won't be joining today. He has we have an exam tomorrow, so he's studying for that.
Did he message me? No, he did not. Please have him message me next. Oh, he did. Okay. Never mind. Oh no, he didn't. Please have him. Anyways, we're gonna go through rebuttal, and since there's a small group, so we can actually do like good interactive exercises. Someone give me a topic. Like anyone.
This house proposes a world where animal testing was banned.
Can it just be this house would ban animal testing?
Yep.
All right. Wait, let me set like the title as all right. So does anyone remember argument structure?
Principle or pragmatic?
Pragmatic. Can any one of you just develop an argument for me? I'll give you the argument title. So I hope you remember the MBT format. So this house would ban animal motion because topic. Motion because title. This house would ban animal testing because what are practical arguments for this? We're just building this argument to rebut it. So if anyone wants to pitch in, otherwise let me just think of a practical argument. Okay, so let's say we're on let's use a different motion because this is a very principally motion. Anyone else give me another motion, just because I want one where we can make a well-constructed practical argument.
This house would nationalize Amazon.
Okay. This house would nationalize Amazon. Okay, so the topic, your argument is Amazon is a harmful monopoly to consumers. What is the argument structure for pragmatic arguments? So we have the title, then what do we have?
Then the problem.
Okay.
Then
All right, let's go one by one. So problem. Can you guys tell me some problems with Amazon being a monopoly?
Harm smaller businesses.
Yeah, smaller businesses. It's a harmful monopoly to consumers. So something which is related to consumers.
they can increase prices.
Yeah. Okay, higher prices. So look up something called Amazon Web Service. So they pretty much have a monopoly over that. What else?
Maybe lower quality due to
Yeah, just like, okay, like you guys know like the stuff about why monopolies are bad. Let's actually make it Disney, not Amazon, because Amazon's a bit of that it's a okay, this house would break up Disney. So sorry, I keep changing the motion, but I'm just trying to get the best like argument so that we can go through rebuttal well. Okay, so the argument is Disney is a harmful monopoly. And let's make this like a broader argument. So what are problems with Disney being a monopoly?
Worker exploitation.
So
Lack of variety
that's
of
actually okay. Yes, but that's okay. I don't want to get into the economics of this. In a regular argument, the work exploitation would not come under this title, but that's because of like an economics thing, not really because of an argument thing. Just for your information, when you can only work for one company, it's called a monopsony. Another one is harm smaller studios.
That may lead to lower quality and lower choice also for consumers.
Yeah, so I think lower choice in particular, they just like make the same movies. This also then means like, okay, so we have enough problems. What are the impacts of this?
Lack of coming up a variety of content.
Yep, lack of new art, so like whether movies is and TV shows, they just make the same thing. Directors have less autonomy. So basically, like the arguments like if Disney gets like a $2 million budget to like remake Lion King, they have to like stick to the original script and they can't like change things around. So like new directors don't get autonomy. Just other impacts of these things, lower choice. Okay, what are some bad impacts of okay, so I think then like worker exploitation can be like a problem and an impact in and of itself. All right. Anyways, we have all of this, and then can I hear some solutions? Why does breaking up Disney solve these problems?
It does because it provides some space for the smaller actors that we earlier talked about to actually step up in the industry. So the analysis in this would basically be that how Disney is somewhat eating up the space that is there, and that the moment you try to
Yeah. Does everyone understand? I'm sorry, we're going really quick through this because the purpose is not to build an argument, it's to rebut it. Do you understand why it's easier for smaller actors to step up? So basically, in economics, there's a concept called monopolies of economies of scale, which is when a business gets really big, their costs reduce. So it's really hard for smaller companies to compete at low cost. So if you break Disney up into like smaller companies, their average cost will also increase, so they can compete with each other, is basically the, if you had to run this argument in a debate, what you would say. What else? How does this help workers? Like, yeah, there's now competition, so they have to like compete for talented workers.
There's also more space. I mean, relating to lower choice, more space for newer characters and movies.
Yeah, and no, that is not yeah. So basically, like competition leads to all of these things. Now, let's rebut this argument. Let's leave this in this color. Before we like get on to rebuttal, somehow.
So I had a question. When you're rebutting this, will you rebut the part that it's a harmful monopoly or that it's a monopoly in and of itself?
It depends. It's about I mean, I don't think you can. It depends on what you can rebut. Like, can you really rebut the fact that Disney is a monopoly? Maybe. I don't think that's the strongest rebuttal. I think you will definitely be rebutting the latter. But before that, let me tell you a few things that rebuttal is not. I will go on a limb here and say 70% of what debaters in debate call rebuttal is not rebuttal. Rebuttal is not repeating your side's own arguments. Rebuttal is not giving new arguments for your own side. So you can't be like, well, that's all well and good, but look at all these great things that Disney does. Rebuttal is not weighing. So rebuttal is not saying this is not an important argument. Weighing is important, but it is not a substitute for rebuttal. Rebuttal is disproving the argument. Now, there are two different ways you can do this. The first is you can flip the argument, and the second is you can mitigate and weigh. What do both of these things mean? Flipping the argument is agreeing with some parts of the argument. So maybe the fact that Disney is a monopoly, but saying the outcome are actually good and not what the other side claims. So Disney is a harmful monopoly. We agree it is a monopoly. However, that doesn't lead to all these problems. That is actually a good thing. And that's flipping it. And then you need to explain why these particular problems don't arise. And then the second is mitigation and weighing. So this is saying, okay, but the situation isn't that bad because, and then you provide reasons. Compare this to our side's arguments. So I know this sounds a little bit like Greek. So let's try rebutting this. I actually want you to focus more on not doing this. These two are slightly higher level strategies. I want you to focus on just disproving the argument. So saying any of this is false. So you can contest the fact that the problem exists, or you can contest the fact that the problem is important, or you can say the problem exists and the problem is important, but your model does not solve for it. So can I have anyone try to rebut any part of these three parts of the argument?
May I?
Mm-hmm.
Probably the way this argument is set up, the way we've tried to prioritize art as something that needs to have quality, but the fact that how that very definition is subjective in nature, and what the proposition is trying to cater to is a certain consumer base, which may or may not actually agree with the majority, let's say.
But you're saying it may or may not agree. Remember, you're not disproving an argument for the sake of disproving it. You're disproving it to win the debate. So let's be more attacking on it. Yeah, Aisha.
Right, you can hear me.
Yeah.
Right. So I was looking at the lower choices problem. I think to go against that, what they're proposing is to break it down as a monopoly, right? But we can rebut that by saying that as it is a monopoly currently, it has more capital resources to expand the production of the movies it's creating, which is creating more choices and higher quality levels for people solely because it's a monopoly and it has the resources to be capable of doing that.
Yeah.
That's
I
what-
mean, that's fair. That explicitly disproves why lower choice is not sort of like a big issue. So can we have someone try to disprove one of the other two as well? Yeah, Ronav.
I had something to disprove lower choice itself.
We've already disproved that, and that's sort of the easier one to disprove. Can you tell me why worker exploitation may not be a problem?
I can try for harm smaller studios.
Okay, let's go with that, and then Sambhav. Yeah.
It gives the smaller studios sort of a expectation maybe, or it gives them an inspiration to create certain movies which the consumer already likes. So it'll give them, set a standard in the industry, maybe.
That's a standard. But the argument is smaller studios cannot compete because they don't have as much money as Disney. So
Okay.
you get how that doesn't rebut it. The claim is that, and I know like I don't blame you for that because we haven't like fleshed out this argument law, but the claim is they don't have
I think.
the money to compete with Disney. Yeah, Sambhav, then Sneh, then Ayan. Sambhav, then Ayan, then Sneh.
Right. So then we can essentially say that at the point at which Disney is such a large company, at the point at which it essentially lives and dies on its reputation, especially because their movies are mostly catered to children. And like a parent is like probably is going to be like unwilling to let their child watch a movie if they know that the company is doing bad things. So at that point, they're way more likely to actually look out for their reputation, and therefore they're way more likely to treat their workers well. That there's no scandal or anything which
Yeah, so basically your point is that Disney cares about their reputation, so they won't exploit their workers. Fair enough. Also, stop saying at the point at which and just say when. It saves a lot of time. And it's the same thing. I don't know why people say that. Anyways, Ayan.
I think we can rebut the point where it harms smaller studios by saying that smaller studios normally appeal to a different audience. Because like how when we take video games, there are like companies like Epic Games and Riot Games making games. There are also people who make indie games who are successful.
I think, yeah, that's an interesting. So, yeah, they operate in different markets.
Yeah.
I think that's. I mean, yes, that I wanted to make sure you're not doing any of this. So for the sake of that, yeah, that's a valid point. Let's now. Okay, I think you guys have a good idea of what. Everyone take a screenshot, please. Okay. I'm assuming at least one of you have taken a screenshot. So, wait, Sambhav. Oh, hi, Argument. I don't think you've been here before, but that's all right. Yasne.
Yeah, something that just struck my mind in regards to like show like small businesses and small enterprises in that debate. What can you actually argue that there is a very weird presumption that there needs to be certain sort of competition between these small actors and Disney, and that probably Disney is taking them in and is providing them a better platform.
Yeah, that's actually very good rebuttal by saying that yeah, you can. The short answer is yes. That is good. I'm sort of going a little fast over this because now I want to do an exercise. I just want to check. Has everyone done the like? I sent 3 videos about WSDC speaker roles. We'll go into that in more depth. Hopefully, when next time we have a few more students, because speaker roles is something I don't want anyone to miss out on. But did you guys at least like watch those videos? They were like 2 minutes long.
Yep.
All right. So I think we're gonna now practice because now we've gone through argument structure, principle. We've also gone through setting up arguments and now rebuttal. So I think it's time to do a little bit of practice as we would in a debate.
I didn't want to interrupt, but I actually wasn't there for the last time we did arguments and rebuttals because I was having exams till now, so I didn't have time to go through the speaker roles. But someone mentioned they had screenshots, right? So could those be put on the group so I can go through them? I'll go with the videos as well, but
Yeah, that's okay, right? I will do a session on speaker roles, so don't worry about that. I just wanted you guys to have a little bit of a background, but yeah, that's okay, Sampath. Okay. So what we'll do is like with the earlier sessions, I'll pair you up like 1-1. What I want the person on the proposition to do is really, to the best of their efforts, give me a full setup. So this includes defining the motion and like setting up what you think the debate is about, one principal argument and one practical argument. I want the opposition speaker to rebut these three, like what the proposition speaker says, using like what we just did, and then deliver two arguments of their own. So everyone, we have another student.
Is this for the same prep motion?
No, I'll give everyone different motions.
Also for the proposition, there is a principal argument and there was one more type of argument, right?
Yeah, practical.
Okay.
So the practical argument structure is what we just did.
Right.
If you want here for principal arguments, they're basically arguments surrounding morals. So you need to explain to me what morals can be attached to this debate, why I should care about it, and why your side upholds that.
So more of a rational and a moral argument, one of each.
Yeah, I mean, I actually just want two arguments. If you can get a principle and a practical, that would be great, but don't force yourself to look for principles when sometimes there aren't any. So, has everyone understood the drill? Because I'm going to give you 15 minutes of prep time after this, because I want you to sort of take time to sort of absorb everything and hear you speak at length now. Is anyone? Yeah.
Yeah, so we're only having one speech per speaker, right?
Yeah.
And the opposition speaker is also supposed to give a 7-minute speech.
I would really like it if you could give 7 to 8 minute speeches, but that's just like the timing is something we can worry about after we do the speak roles. Right now, I primarily just want to see your skills and how you're developing arguments and rebutting them. Yeah, Ariman?
What topic have to prepare a speech?
Sorry, you're not.
On what agenda we have to prepare a
Oh,
speech?
right. I'll give everyone like the topics. You I don't think you were here for the previous sessions. Did you see the recordings by any chance? Okay, so please go watch. That's okay. Just go watch them, and just to the best of your ability, you were there when I was doing like the rebuttal explanation.
At the last one.
Okay, so then just till the best of your opportunity, to the best of your potential, just try to deliver two arguments. And if you're on the opposition and rebuttal to like the previous speaker. Also, what grade are you in? Can I just
11th.
11th? Okay, great. Okay, so I'm just pulling up some motions and I'll put them in the chat. Everyone's prep time will.
Wait, so we should should explain the problem and give one principal argument, right?
Yes.
Okay.
How long do you want us to speak?
No, wait. Two arguments.
And
Explain. I want you to set up the debate and then give me two arguments. And if you're in opposition, to do rebuttal and then two arguments. How long should you speak for? Not more than 8 minutes. But I'm like, it's all right if you don't reach 8 minutes. Like at the get-go, don't get like frightened by that, because I know sometimes it's hard to. I'm quite confident we'll all get there like after our we do speaker roles. I just need attendance for that. Okay, so on the first motion, can we have Sneh on the or wait, some of you have to go, right? So can we have Sambhav on the proposition and then Aisha on the Sambhav on the proposition and Sneh on the opposition. So your motion is okay, your motion is just this.
So
And
Sneeze off, right? Just to confirm.
yeah, you are proper because you need to go. If you can stay. Yeah. No. Okay, that's your motion. So Sneh, you are opposition, Sambhavi, your proposition. Then we'll have Ayan on prop with Ronav on. Again, we're going to run into like odd numbers. So Aryaman, since you haven't been there, you can just like either do a drill with me or just watch and note down the feedback I'm giving everyone else, just because we need even numbers. Ayan and Ronav, your Ayan, your prop, Ronav, your op. Ronav, also what grade are you in? Can you just put that in? Or just tell me.
I'm in the 11th grade.
In the 11th grade, okay. But it should not. I'm just. This is an interesting one, and I think you can. Actually, wait, no, we pretty much did this. In countries where okay. Do you guys understand this motion? If you don't, let me know. Aisha, you are op. Ananyaveer, are you here?
Yeah.
Okay, so Ananyaveer, your prop. Aisha, your op on the last motion, which is. Yeah, this is fair enough. And Ariman, why don't you prepare? Which motion do you like out of the three? Whichever one you like, just prepare an opposition speech on that. Or
Sure.
and you can maybe go at the end or after you've like heard them speak and like some feedback and just so that yeah. I'll be back at 8:15, so just yeah.
How much time are we left with?
2 minutes. Okay, Sambhav, let's start because we're running a little short on time. You first, right?
Right, can I just have like a minute?
Yeah.
Also, if the second pair is not in a hurry to leave, because I would have to leave by 8:45-ish.
Yeah, you can go now. Yeah, are you proper or?
I am off.
Okay, yeah. Who is your prop?
Ananya Veer.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we'll be able to get through everyone's speeches, so you may just need to uh I'll tell you what we'll do. Let's get through as many as we can.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, somehow. And then we can continue next time, honestly. Um, so everyone just stop preparing now and make sure you hear like my feedback to them. And then next class, we'll start with this. Probably give new motions as well. Argument by then you would have caught up on the like previous things as well. Sorry, I made you prep without you actually speaking, but that's also a good thing to do in life, to just prepare motions. So
Right. No, what I was asking was if we could go next, if that's okay.
yeah. If we have time after Sampav and Sneh, but let's
Right.
at least get through.
All right. Okay, I just want to warn you, it's not a
I said you're not allowed to like lower my expectations before you give your speech. If it's a bad speech, it's okay to give bad speeches, and it's okay for me to point out that they're not good. Like, I don't know a single person who doesn't give bad speeches every once in a while. So in life, don't like lower people's expectations. Just it's okay to make mistakes. Anyway, Sambhav, go ahead.
I'll be starting. 3, 2, 1. Panel, we live in a time more dangerous than ever. We live in a time where all out war is closer than ever before. We live in a time where Russia has just invaded Ukraine, where China is on the verge of invading Taiwan, and where the superpowers of the world are actually on the verge of engaging direct war with each other. But more than that, we live in a time where a single press of a button from the president of a country or can wipe out entire countries, can wipe out millions and billions of people, and can leave the earth uninhabitable forever. That's why we would prefer a world without nuclear weapons. But firstly, what do we think that this world actually looks like? So we think that nuclear weapons refer to like what can these nuclear weapons do, right? We think that these are the weapons capable of like wiping out entire countries in a matter of hours. We think that these are the kind of weapons which actually spread radioactive material, which ensures that the area which they're actually um, used on is unlivable for like the next 100 years. But then secondly, notice how in the motion we're only preferring to live in a world without nuclear weapons, right? We're not saying that we want to remove all like technology like guns and stuff. So opposition can't come here and argue that, oh, we're going to have like now primitive warfare where people are like killing each other. No, we're still going to have like drones and stuff. So then yeah, human involvement is still going to be at the minimum, right? Three arguments. Firstly, on principle, why this promotes equality on an international scale. Secondly, on extension on why we'll have better relations, and lastly, why it'll lead to a much safer world. On principle, then, why does this actually promote equality on a national scale? But first, why do we think that this equality on an international scale is so important? This is because we think that all nations should be equal. We think that all nations should have like an equal say on what happens to the earth, because at the end of the day, all these nations are equal stakeholders on the state, on the condition of the earth. Like if the earth dies, all these nations die with them. Therefore, we think that all nations should have equality. All nations should be able to decide of what happens. Now, what currently happens? Currently, the 9 countries who hold nuclear weapons can essentially hold other countries on ransom, right? So what this looks like is USA telling Canada that, hey, you give me this trade agreement, or like I have a big nuclear weapon, right? So then therefore we think that this is actually a form of international terrorism at the point at which some countries have nuclear weapons but other countries don't. Therefore we would like to level the playing field. But then secondly, we think that currently smaller countries have essentially no say in like the international way of like what happens in the international relations in the international world. Why is this the case? This is essentially because there's like a fundamental power imbalance which we think will actually be reduced when you remove nuclear weapons, right? Because we've established that these nuclear weapons are extremely powerful, and like when you don't have this nuclear weapon, you're actually way weak, like militarily way weaker than a country which has nuclear weapons. Therefore, you're unlikely to actually have a say in what will happen in the grand scheme of things. But now, why will like treaties or like other forms of agreement not be why will other forms of agreement not reach the same result, which is equality on a national scale, on an international scale? This is essentially because what we think is that there'll always be like a fundamental power imbalance, like I stated earlier. When you have nuclear weapons, it doesn't matter if you have a treaty with like India and China, or like Taiwan and China, saying that, well, China won't attack Taiwan, because when China has like a big nuclear bomb, nothing is ever certain. But now, secondly, why do we think that this leads to better relations between countries? Because currently, what happens is, like I've stated, that like you can essentially hold them to a hostage. So then what happens? So why we have better international relations, due to 2 reasons. Firstly, because we think that removing nuclear weapons like overall is going to lead to much less suspicion between countries, right? This looks like countries like USA and North Korea not being that actively like their economic sanctions not being that bad, them not having such bad relations, because North Korea never defaulted on an agreement not to produce nuclear weapons, because there never were nuclear weapons in the first place. But this also looks like like USA never invading Iraq on the because Iraq never produced mass weapons of destruction, because there never were any mass weapons of destruction. So therefore we're going to have better relations. But then secondly, we also have better relations essentially because more countries are more equal. Therefore you're going to have better trade agreements, therefore you're going to have better military agreements, therefore the economies of all countries is going to prosper. But then lastly, and perhaps most importantly, is why this leads to a safer world. Notice how this is an argument which actually deals with like a very long term scenario as well, right? Because if 200 years down the line as well, like somebody is going to like detonate a nuclear bomb, the earth is going to face the consequences, right? Also notice how this is at an extremely large scale, because it's like you can destroy entire countries and perhaps even the earth. Now, why does this actually lead to a safer world? This happens in 3 key ways. Firstly, that we think that when like dictators like Putin, or dictators like North, or like countries like North Korea do have the power to actually launch a nuclear weapon, this is incredibly unsafe, because they're right. So this is incredibly unsafe. But then secondly, we think that low level conflicts such as like the Russia and Ukraine have a far lower probability to lead to like mass destruction, because when you don't have nuclear weapons, then a USA and Russia is unlikely to engage when they don't believe they have the upper hand because they have nuclear weapons. Notice how this analysis also applies to large countries invading small countries, right? So let's say that USA in our world is far more unlikely to, like, say, invade Canada, because none of them have nuclear weapons and therefore none of them have an advantage. Therefore, we leave to a safer world. And then lastly, Lastly, terrorists often have the potential to use nuclear weapons, and like I mentioned, when they use nuclear weapons, the impacts are at such a large scale that we would prefer not to have nuclear weapons entirely. Therefore, we think that we prefer a world where nuclear weapons never exist.
Can you stay until the end of Snake's speech so I can give you a quick call and some feedback? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Snake, let's go.
10 seconds just to gather them.
Just to check, did everyone take notes on what he said? Or at least heard him?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Please take notes on what Sneh says, because I'm gonna ask you guys some questions about both their speeches afterwards. Anyway, Sneh, go ahead.
All right. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Panel, if we were to summarize the arguments given by side proposition, two main things would come into your mind. First is that there needs to be some sort of an equality among nations, but secondly is that they're establishing a much more secure world. Note that both these things are not going to happen. First is that what exactly secure equality is ending up doing in the world, right? This equality ends up countries actually not wanting to militarily intervene or actually militarily harm a somewhat smaller or weaker nation. Note that this is still going to happen in their paradigm, because military strength apart from nuclear weapons also exists. So if in their own case study, USA still wanted to intervene and let's say threaten Canada, it can still continue to do so. But also note that how there is an even greater issue in regards to this, because of the lack, in case of lack of nuclear weapons, there is no, let's say, paradigm or reason for large nations such as USA or Russia to not go to war. The one thing that is restricting all nations right now to not go to war is the threat of a nuclear war at large. That is to say, the very reason a regional conflict such as Pakistan and India is somewhat pushed into international news is that nuclear war is a threat very big to the entire international community, something that we'll be developing in our arguments as well. But also know that secondly, in regards to the paradigm of what a safer world looks like, they have this characterization that people's threats towards each other would reduce and that people would actually live in a much more symbiotic relations. Two problems with this. First is that they do not provide us any definite characterization as to why the lack of nuclear weapons is actually going to force countries to be more friendly towards each other. And even if we do accept this characterization that let's say the USA and North Korea, in the absence of nuclear weapons, does become a friendlier nation, it does not necessarily, this fact in itself is actually quite dubious in nature, and the very idea and the very threat of them going to war in any situation in the future is actually furthering down the idea of international security at large. But let's now move on to the two main arguments, which would make it clearer to you what exactly the case and the characterization that we just pushed in the rebuttals means, right? The first argument is going to be regarding the choice of security for nations at large. But second argument is going to be in regards to the deterrence policy that nuclear weapons actually promote, right? In regards to choice, now choice in its very basis means that these countries have a choice to establish the way they're going to protect the nation. That is to say that the United States of America has the capability as well as the choice to actually choose whether or not they want to establish nuclear weapons for the protection of the nation. But note that why this is necessary for two main reasons. First is that the government directly has a responsibility towards its citizens to show to them that what is a preemptive mechanism that is present, which would actually make sure that the public at large is going to be respectful of United States stand at large, but be the fact that weaponry at large to actually hold, which is going to be beneficial for their own security purposes, until and unless they're going to actually instigate a war out of it, is somewhat beneficial also. Because note this, various nuclear weapon holding countries, even India and Pakistan, actually push forward the idea that these are for retaliatory markers. That is to say that India would only use it once Pakistan does upon it, which means that nuclear weapons at the end of the day in warfare have always been seen as a responsive mechanism rather than one that is actually instigating a certain sort of conflict at large. But also note that how this is actually a deterrence mechanism, also something that we actually want to develop upon, and we feel that is probably the winning point of this entire debate, right? Now, what exactly is this deterrence mechanism that we're talking about? Deterrence mechanism in our world looks like United States actually having a reason at the back of their mind to not harm Russia, because probably the way they harm Russia is going to directly affect them. That is to say, India thinking that they should not use nuclear weapons, that they should not fight with Pakistan, because if they do, they would actually be harming themselves only. Understanding that nuclear radiations and neighborhood and scientific reasons for the very same is something that is actually directly harming their very population. What then does this look like? This looks like nuclear weapons actively providing reasons to individuals to not go to war. That is to say, nuclear weapons giving you reasons that why a country should not go to war with another, because of the very fact that their own institutions are probably going to be more harmed, or that their own peace loving, or let's say scientific institutions, because they are in the neighborhood, are going to be more harmed, right? Then what exactly is the problem that we're pushing forward in this? The problem is that in their case study, when there is no fear of war, let's say that there is no exact response to why a war should not happen, because at the end of the day, it's only tanks, it's only guns, it's only a few people dying, and also the fact that there is no outward methods to prevent it, then we have a situation wherein war becomes a constant rather than a dubious question in front of the eyes of leaders, right? What are the impacts of the situation? Two main impacts. First is that there is no fear because of the presence, because of the lack of presence of nukes. What does this lack of fear looks like? This lack of fear looks like an authoritarian leader sitting on a throne with a lot of military at their hands, being the president of the United States of America, and pushing forward a war against, let's say, Canada. At that point of time, the United States of America doesn't exactly have any reason not to do this, not even the reason to actually think that, let's say, Canada might or might not have nuclear weapons, or the fact that how Russia or China, Canada's allies, can come forward and actually try to protect this nation. Because we do feel that deterrence policy is not only limited to this one particular nation, but also actually extends to the impact that this nation's soft power has over other things, right? We note that the case study of Russia and Ukraine might be some sort of a contradiction to this very idea. But let's understand that why it actually isn't. Russia's actions in Ukraine has been noticed and has been pushed under a certain sort of regulatory mechanism, just because of the fact that Russia doesn't want it to be exceeded to such a level that United States has to respond to it, and United States hasn't exactly escalated the matter by getting involved into it because they won't want a nuclear war or a world war at large. What does then this look like? This looks like countries actually trying to prevent fueling the entire situation, or by rather involving themselves in the entire situation, making it worse for all the parties, but actually trying to take diplomatic processes at priority, right? Because the two main stakeholders in this, first is the person that is actually going to start the war, would actually think about the impact that they create upon their own people, but secondly, the people that are viewing, that is to say, countries which are the third parties in the entire conflict, would actually try to actively push forward for peace because of the imminent harm that would actually make them suffer in the longer run, right? But also note that how this very idea that the presence of nuclear weapons causes nuclear wars is debunked by this very theory, right? Because the moment this threat is present as a deterrence theory, this idea of a nuclear war would not be present. A case study of this would be clearly of India and Pakistan. The very reason these both countries haven't gone to a war after the development of said nuclear weapons is because of the said threat of nuclear weapons, but also the fact that international bodies and countries have actually pushed forward an initiative to make sure that they are at peace with each other. The very reason we haven't had World War III probably is because Russia, Ukraine, China refuse to interact with each other in regards to war matters, right? That even when USA tries to provide arms to Ukraine, they explicitly say that do not send these arms to Russia, only use them to defend yourself. What have we proven in this speech to you then? We have proven to you that security is something that can only be persistent by deterrence in our side of the world, but also note that how the idea of choice is present to make sure that countries are able to protect themselves and their citizens. Very, very proud of this.
Okay, so very quickly, I'm going to give feedback to both of you. Then I'm going to ask the rest of you who you thought won, and then I'll tell you who won. Sambhav, a few different things. Good setup. Yeah, I think this is exactly how you should be setting up debates. So what I liked is about how he really just like made it clear that the scale of nuclear weapons is unlike any other type of weapons. What the setup was missing was a comparative. So what does a world without nuclear weapons actually look like? And that's actually okay, I take it back. This wasn't a good setup because while you did a good part, which the like one part, which is telling me why nuclear weapons are so bad important, you didn't tell me what your world looks like. And that's why a lot of your arguments had big gaps in them, because it was hard for me to envision why you thought nuclear weapons are so different than biological weapons or chemical weapons or like other weapons of mass destruction. So I needed to know how you think countries are going to engage in conflict and things like that. On your principle, I just straight up, I don't think this was the correct principle to run in the debate. Oh wait, principle of equality. No, sorry. This was a fine principle. What was missing in this? Okay, because we don't have time, I'll just tell you. What was missing was you telling me, you told me why if countries don't have nuclear weapons, they are more equal. But you needed to do more as to telling me why nuclear weapons are the tipping point. Because the first question that came into my head, and Sneh, you should have caught up on this, is like, okay, but surely certain countries are much richer than others, even in the absence of nuclear weapons. Like certain countries have much bigger militaries. Why are nuclear weapons like the biggest thing harming equality? So if you wanted to run this principle, then you'd have to say that. But I think the better principle to run would have just been that the existence of nuclear weapons just they shouldn't exist. Like things that can just like even if there's a 1% chance of nuclear war happening. Yeah. Also, don't like you sounded really extreme and like I just because in your setup as well, like there were a lot of times it was just very hard for me to agree with your conception of the world. So you were just like the USA can nuke Canada if they don't agree to like a treaty. But like that's not how the real world works. If you think that's how it works, you need to give me like reasons as to why countries act this way, because that's not something that intuitively comes to me. On your second argument, again, it leads to the same thing. Why are nuclear weapons like the one thing that changes all of this? So you gave some good material, and I think you broadly had the correct arguments. What you didn't have is the uniqueness part. Why nuclear weapons lead to better relation, and why can't countries exert power in other ways? Safer world, I think, was the best argument, which should have come first. But the issue is you did not develop it. So you had a couple of good ideas. So number one, your idea about rogue states. You just said like states like Russia and North Korea have the power to launch nukes. I want to know more about why it's so terrifying that countries who we consider rogue have nuclear weapons, and how, because you surely should have caught on to the fact that opposition's case would be deterrence. And that is, I'll come to opposition's issues later, but you had to like tell me why rogue states, terrorists, that's another pretty decent argument which was not expanded upon. So you said a lot of things, but you didn't explain any of them, which I think is what you should take away. Also, like, yeah, Sneh, with your speech, yeah, I think your structure was fine. The main issue was you had one argument, and that argument was used in rebuttal. So your rebuttal to both his argument, okay, no, to be fair, I think you rebutted his argument on equality pretty decently by saying that military capability still exists. And like, yeah, you rebutted that. But after that, your entire speech was just a repeat of deterrence explained in different ways. While I appreciate the fact that you explained the argument of deterrence really well, um, if you go back to what I said in rebuttal is not using your arguments to defeat their arguments. If you already have an argument on deterrence, then either don't rebut his argument and be like, my argument will directly respond to this, or and what you should do is look at the reasons he's given you in his arguments, or the links, like the logical links that I just pointed out, and attack those links. It is not sufficient to take down an argument by just saying this is our argument. So there's that. So while you rebutted his first argument, you didn't exactly rebut his second argument. You just gave me another argument. In terms of your first argument, I kind of get it, but I don't see why choice is that important. And especially in light of everything that proposition said about how dangerous nuclear weapons can be, but why it's more important than safety. So I would say if you want to build out the choice argument, you'd have to make it comparative to what proposition has already said. But that's probably not the argument that like I would run. I don't think there would be a principle, like you don't need to fit in, and that's why I said earlier, you don't need to like try to fit in a principle where there isn't one. Your deterrence argument was well built. And yeah, it's just that that was the only argument you had. So if the next speaker came and like took down your deterrence argument, a lot of your rebuttal would have gone and your argument would have gone as well. Having said that, who do you guys think won this debate and why? If you think proposition one, raise your hands. If you think opposition one, okay. Ronav, why do you think proposition one?
I felt that the arguments presented were more valid in this sense.
Okay, can you be a little more specific? So what compelled you about their arguments, and why would you say they were more valid than the other team's arguments?
Not more valid, I felt they were more relevant, if that makes sense.
Okay, Ananya view?
So basically, proposition had like arguments that affected the world at a much larger scale. So when we compare both proposition and opposition's argument, even let's say that opposition's argument is more likely to happen, but proposition's arguments are happen on such a large level that when we weigh them, prop's arguments take the largest hand. That's why I think proposition.
Okay. Those of you who think opposition won, why do you think opposition won? Yeah.
Yeah, so similar to what you said, I thought deterrence was the main thing which is discussed almost throughout the speech. But I think the reason I would give this to the opposition is because of that point, is because it was a more convincing argument, because it went against the very major security argument given by the proposition. Because and also I thought if the proposition had a lot of good points, but if the proposition had actually discussed deterrence, I think that's the first thing that comes to mind when you look at the opposite side of that statement. I think deterrence is the main point which should come up. So if that had been addressed by the proposition, then I think they would have taken the win. But here I think it was a pretty important point to discuss. That's why I would give it to the opposition here.
Yeah. Just putting in everything you guys said. So I thought opposition won. Not, I can't comment on the margin, but it wasn't incredibly close, but it wasn't incredibly clear either. I forgot who spoke. You are right to say that proposition's arguments had a larger scale. And that is true. If proposition had filled in the logical gaps between their arguments and had been able to prove what their argument titles were, they would have definitely taken this debate. However, like I said, there were major gaps within their argumentation that meant that I couldn't accept it. I also think that, like Aisha said, deterrence seemed like a pretty obvious argument that opposition would bring up. And even though I wouldn't like be like, I don't think it's uncharitable to expect proposition to defend that. The main reason I gave it to opposition is just because the deterrence argument was well built. And when you judge debates, and this is important for you as well, you don't judge them based on the quality of individual arguments. If a speaker says something which is not ludicrous, you are forced to believe it until it is disproven. So while I don't think that opposition built out deterrence to the greatest extent that they could have, I think that it was built out sufficient enough and characterized enough for me to believe it more than what proposition said. Having said that, if proposition had filled in more logical gaps, it would have been harder for the current version of opposition's deterrence argument to have beaten them. And I would have then given it to prop because of the scale. But anyways, it's hard to judge debates based on 2 speeches, which is why we have 8 speeches in a debate. But hopefully this exercise gave you a little bit of like a understanding of what you need to be doing in debates and what you need to be like looking out for. Overall, I'm happy you guys both spoke for like almost 8 minutes and you guys had pretty little prep. So overall, I'm quite happy with like the session. We'll hear the rest of you guys speak next time and we can stop the recording.
But the thing is, I won't be probably here